One of the misconceptions that I've heard over the years hundreds of times is that weight training does not stimulate cardiovascular respiratory improvements because it's not aerobic. I have not found that to be the case. Now, we've all seen this scenario. Guy does a heavy set of bench, puts the bar down. Hey Joe, what'd you do last night? Did you watch the game, man? Sitting around, next set's 5 minutes later. Yeah, not much stimulation there for cardiovascular respiratory improvement. However, if you keep your workout moving, you keep the rest periods short, weight training can stimulate cardiovascular respiratory improvement. Before I explain why weight training can stimulate cardiovascular respiratory improvement, I'd like to define two terms in a pretty simplistic manner, and that is the term aerobic exercise and anaerobic exercise. Now, aerobic exercise is something like walking, jogging, biking, something you can do for a long period of time. And the reason you're able to do it for a long period of time is the body is able to take in enough oxygen so that the muscles involved in the activity can continue to function. Aerobic metabolism can take place, which allows your body to process glucose, glycogen, and fatty acids at a pace to allow the activity to continue. Anaerobic exercise, which is what weight training is very high intensity. And so what happens is the body and the muscles start to run out of oxygen. They are in an anaerobic metabolism, and as a consequence of that, they are not able to keep up with the activity. Fatigue products build up in the muscle, particularly lactic acid. That's where you get that burny feeling, and then at some point the muscle fails. This process doesn't take that long, so in the past, that's why it was thought that weight training really wasn't going to do much for cardiovascular respiratory function because the bouts of exercise were very brief. In the late 80s, I worked at a health club. Now, my job at the health club was to meet prospective clients, talk to them about their goals, take them around the facility, and then sign them up for membership. Well, when I was taking them on the tour, not only was my objective to show them the equipment and the amenities we offered, but to also show them what kind of shape they were in. So there was a particular stepper in this gym that obviously was aerobic, but the pedals were pretty hard to push, so it also required some strength. So this was the perfect machine to put people on who told me I've never worked out or I haven't worked out for years, and I'd put them on this machine. So let's just go 3-5 minutes, see how you do. And many times they couldn't finish the exercise, so it was pretty easy to show them that they needed to, start working out. However, this was also the time when aerobic exercise was the big craze. Weight training was still not that mainstream. Most people didn't do weight training. It was mostly the aerobic exercise, running and biking, jogging, aerobic dance classes. So when someone comes in and say, well, I'm in great shape, I'm a runner, or I do aerobic exercise all the time, essentially I would say, all right, let me put you on the stepper, let's see how fit you are. So then they would go on the stepper, and of course they'd be able to do it, but they were always surprised that they struggled as much as they did. And that was my opening to say, your aerobic exercise is great, that's good, keep doing that, but you need to add the other aspect, you need to add some strength training. Now, the reason I bring this up is because I did almost no aerobic exercise. And the thought all those years was that you need to do aerobic exercise to stimulate cardiovascular respiratory improvement, that weight training didn't do it. Now, I could get on that stepper and go for 60 minutes, no problem. I also at that time had a pulse rate of 48 beats a minute, which you normally only see in people doing high volume aerobic exercise. So the question is, if weight training does not stimulate cardiovascular respiratory improvement, how was I able to perform so well on the stepper, and why was my pulse rate so low? And the answer is that exercise does not necessarily need to be aerobic to stimulate cardiovascular respiratory improvement. When I was bodybuilding, I would often squat to failure. And during that process, my heart would feel like it was beating out of my chest, and I'd be breathing like a racehorse. That amount of stimulation to my cardiovascular system caused my heart and lungs to get stronger and improve. So the stimulation isn't steady state, the stimulation is intensity of effort. And the model has two aspects. One is aerobic exercise, which we know improves heart-lung vascular function. Steady state, ongoing exercise. The other aspect is anaerobic exercise, and the stimulation obviously is not steady state, but it's intensity of effort. And intensity of effort is another way to stimulate improvements in the body. So the model has both aspects leading to cardiovascular stimulation. One aerobic, one anaerobic, both effective. So how should you exercise if you want to improve cardiovascular respiratory function? Well, one part of the model is aerobic. Now in the past, people would say, if you can do 10 minutes, then you do 20. And when you can do 20, you do 30. And it kept getting longer and longer. The problem with that is long exercise is usually low intensity. And remember, it's how hard you exercise that changes your body, not how long you do it. So you want to have a cutoff point with your aerobic exercise. Have a reasonable amount of time, maybe 20 minutes, 30, somewhere in there, not too long. And instead of doing it longer, make it harder. Increase the incline on your treadmill, increase the resistance on your bike, something like that, so that the exercise gets harder. And in a busy society, we don't really need to be doing more and more and more and longer exercise. Cut it off at a certain point. 20 minutes usually actually is enough. Now the other aspect of this is anaerobic stimulation. So something that gets your heart and lungs working at a high level is going to stimulate improvement, even if it's not aerobic. So what I like to do is weight training, sets of weight training where I throw in sets of cardio, and I call that staggered cardio. So I do several sets of weights, and then I do like a 60-second bout of essentially anaerobic exercise on a cardiovascular piece of equipment. So I may do 60 seconds on a stepper or 60 seconds on a treadmill, but I go to the point where that's about all I can actually do. That way it's essentially an anaerobic workout, but it's stimulating the improvement of the cardiovascular respiratory system. Now, keep in mind that that's a very high intensity form of exercise, and you also have to pick exercise that's appropriate for your fitness level. In conclusion, exercise does not have to be aerobic to stimulate improvements in the cardiovascular respiratory system. One aspect is aerobic, one aspect is anaerobic. Both can lead to excellent results. I'm Jeff Riley for Fitness Innovations.